BTB listeners, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. Listen, if this episode inspires you, do me a favor, take 5 seconds to shoot me a like and subscribe to the podcast. There are several more exciting guests that are in the pipeline, and I just can't thank you enough for your continued support, and let's keep paying the mission forward. Today, I interview Bethany Neeley, who's one of the most decorated high school runners to come out of the state of Indiana. We talk through what it was like growing up in a small town with one stoplight and 400 kids in her entire high school, to just her overall mindset of how she trained, how she competed, how she took on the sport of running, and also basketball. We also dive deep into the relationship she had with her twin sister, Brittany, and the ability that they had together to overcome insurmountable life circumstances that got them to where they're at today. You'll be inspired by this episode and encouraged by Bethany's story. Let's get into it. On today's episode of the BTB Project, today's guest was one of the most decorated track and field stars in the state of Indiana. She was a standout at Greenfield High School, where she secured 2 consecutive 1,600-meter IHSAA Championships in 2012 and 2013. She ran an astonishing 4:53.95 and 4:53.37, respectfully. She's also part of the inaugural all-time best 4x800 relay team and was hailed as Miss Indiana Track and Field Athlete of the Year. With an IHSAA Track and Field Mental Attitude Award under her belt, she's a beacon of sportsmanship. She was a member of the Pan American Junior Team, where she carried the nation's pride on the international stage. An all-state cross-country honoree in 2012, she's a 7-time IHSAA medalist. Having graced Indiana University and North Carolina State University, she is a true embodiment of triumph. Bethany Neeley, welcome to the BTB Project.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby.
Welcome to the BTB Project, designed to empower listeners to identify their why and to live their best lives no matter the circumstances. My name is Coleman Gerhardt. A former athlete and motivational coach, I've had the opportunity to inspire thousands through my story and help accomplish what they are built to be. You'll be encouraged by each and every episode, and let's get into it.
Yeah, when I blow up, I'ma soar high like Peter Pan. In real life, be living out my dreams. If I'm waking up, it's in a foreign.
There are many opportunities in my life to reflect on people that have indirectly impacted me. And it's actually pretty crazy to think of another assistant coach from a sport that my son is involved in would ever cross paths with me. But nonetheless, I have a lot of empathy for people who want to give back to high school sports. But I also have a lot of jaw-dropping moments when I realize that those assistants have unbelievably decorated resumes with their own personal accomplishments. And I just cannot wait to get into a conversation today with one of the greatest high school runners out of Indiana, Miss Bethany Neeley. Welcome to the BTB Project.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I know there's a lot to unpack, and I'm going to start right out of the gate because we were able to talk about this before hopping on, is that you have a better half that isn't with you today, that typically has been by your side from quite some time, and that is your twin sister. So can you maybe walk the listeners through the significance of your sister and how it helped and kind of prepare you to have the accomplishments and the accolades you walk with today?
Absolutely. It's so interesting to think that like most of these listeners don't know that I have a twin. That's been like one of the funniest things walking into adult world.
Right.
It's like when someone realizes you have a twin and they are just like jaw dropped. But my twin sister's name is Brittany. We are identical twins and we are the only siblings. So that kind of factors in how close we are. We both grew up doing the same sports, everything. We weren't like the twins that were in the same classes or anything like that. But in terms of running, the easiest way to describe it is that she was my built-in training partner. She still is to this day. So like when we do see each other or we're visiting each other, we love working out together. But I think the unique factor that a lot of people don't know when it comes to both of us, because if you look at our running careers or like our running resumes, all of our PRs are within like 1 to 2 seconds of each other, even though none of them were run in the same race or maybe not even the same year. But the interesting thing is that she was actually more of a sprinter and I was more of a middle distance or long distance runner.
Gotcha.
So in high school, she would run the 4.8, I would run the 8.16, and then we both kind of just moved our way up in college. So yes, we were training partners, but we were never really racing against each other. There wasn't that competitiveness to it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So built-in training partner, I think, is something that I resonate with, because although I didn't have a twin in my family, I had an older brother who was 4 years older than me, and he was a pretty avid tennis player and many other sports. And it was always nice to have that tough love from him to kind of, help push me along the way. And tennis was the only sport that I could actually beat him in. So once I was able to accomplish that, our relationship got a little bit rocky, but nonetheless, that competitive spirit, the ability to push each other, I think is really neat that you were able to share that. And, when it comes to reflecting back on your career in Indiana and just, your time together growing up, did you ever think when you look back at your resume that you're like, wow, I did that. Like I accomplished that. Was that something that shocked you based off of your accomplishments, or based off of the work and the mindset that you had, you knew that that's what you were capable of?
I always say that we were a little naive in high school. And the reason I say that is because, to give some context, we grew up in a one stoplight, small farm town in Indiana. So there's 2,000 people. That's the entire population of Greentown. And our high school had 400 students. So our graduating class had 99 kids.
Wow.
And I think that is a sense of, when we say naive, that's what we mean, because we really just stayed in our own lane. Like, I think we knew growing up we had potential, and a lot of it, I think, was innate. But as we got a little bit older, halfway through high school, we were like, okay, we could probably be pretty good at this. But everything was very natural, very consistent year after year. And then our senior year, we really made a big jump in track and field. And that's when we were like, whoa, this is really happening. But in terms of reflecting, the reflections now came like legitimately 10 years after. I was telling you before this,
wow, yeah.
We got inducted to the Indiana Track and Field Hall of Fame this summer, and we both got inducted as individuals. And then our 4x8 relay team was the one relay team that got inducted. And it just all happened to be the same year. And it was the first year we were all eligible. And I think this was the first time legitimately in 10 years, we were like, whoa, this happened, and we get to reflect on it. So as more time goes on, it's like that happened, and it's a really good way to celebrate it. Whereas in the moment, you're like, this is amazing. I'm so excited, but I want to keep doing more,
Right. Yeah. It's as you were saying that, I've been able to have a couple runners on the podcast, and my friend David Petty, who was just inducted into the Wisconsin Track and Field High School Hall of Fame, said exactly verbatim the same thing, that a lot of the things that were happening from 10 years ago, he didn't get a chance to fully digest it. And then it was on the podium when he was receiving this accolade that he actually said for the first time he truly thanked his coach for all the stuff that he did for him, that he all throughout those years that he was actually competing for him, that he never really truly thanked him. So I'd love for you to maybe talk about the coach that helped you in high school. And when you got up there with your sister to receive this acknowledgement, how much did your high school coach mean to you?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. We had a few high school coaches. So cross country was a separate coach. We played basketball in the winter, and that's a big success to our track, was we got all this speed from basketball. And our basketball coach was actually one of the most influential ones. that we had. And then we had 2 separate track coaches. So kind of like 4 coaches from just our high school. But interesting enough, the coach or mentor that impacted us the most, his name's Kyle Walsh. And he was someone we met at a running camp growing up. We used to go to this running camp at Culver Academies. Culver is a private military school in Indiana that's on a lake. It's beautiful, but they have a really good running program. And the coach of their running program at the time grew up from a neighboring high school from us, and he coached Kyle Walsh. So Kyle Walsh we were all from the same county, and Indiana's just a very, very tight-knit running community. For anyone that doesn't know, there's no classes. So it doesn't matter if you're a 1A school or a 5A school, everyone competes against everyone.
Interesting. I saw that the school was it a 2A school that you went to, but you still competed with everyone in the state?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's like a really exciting part of our story, I would say. Whereas like, I don't think it would have meant the same if I was from Colorado and I had to run at the 2A track championships. But Kyle Walsh was from a neighboring school that was a 3A school. He had won a state championship. He's probably like 7 or 8 years older than us, I think. I forget that he ages as like we age. But he was really instrumental. He was just like our mentor. He wasn't writing our track workouts until the postseason. But he was just like the shoulder we could lean on the side. He ended up being the head coach at Indiana State for cross country and women's track and field. So when my sister and I went to IU and we both transferred, my sister decided to go back essentially to her high school coach. He got to come this summer, and surprisingly enough, one of his best friends, he ran at Indiana State, and Jordan Fife was one of the males that got inducted into the Indiana Track and Field Hall of Fame this summer. And that is one of Kyle Walsh's best friends, and it was his college teammate. So it was just like this big weekend where everyone was thanking Walsh, even though Walsh was no one's high school coach. He was the person. Everyone had like a 2 or 3 minute acceptance speech, and he was the one that was mentioned the most. And my sister and I both mentioned him. He was like a dad to me growing up. My family, he's part of, my grandma considers him part of our family at this point. He'll be at my sister's wedding next week. Like, he is the person that we just lean on. And he didn't take any of the credit when we were in high school because he was behind the scenes. He wasn't the head track and field coach. But like to this day, most of my success is owed to him.
Yeah, the resignation that I have is he was like a father figure. And, you know, I had a coach that, as I shared a little bit of my story and kind of the mission of the BTB project, is I had a lot of coaches that told me I wasn't going to be able to do something. And when I came across the coach that really kind of took me on to prepare me for college tennis, did take on that father figure role as well and motivated me and encouraged me in ways that I'm sure, obviously, when you receive that award, allowed you and your sister to reflect. And listen, as coaches, you know, it's not always about what we're doing when the lights are on and when the fans are there or whatever. It's what we're doing behind the scenes. It's when you have a crummy workout and how you're being lifted back up from that coach, or if you're having a bad day and the coach recognizes, hey, this might not be the best day for you to train. Why don't you go home and get some rest? You know, those are the types of conversations that I resonate with. And that's neat that you were able to reflect on that with your sister, with your coach. But listen, we're going to get into more of your accolades here in just a sec. But I just would love to know, how did this all start for you? This sport of running in a small town. I'm just totally in awe of, one, the size of community you had, but are there a lot of runners in this community that you grew up in?
No, not before us. Everyone had track and field day. I'm sure your kids have track and field day probably at their schools. So like growing up in elementary, we would play basketball and softball. Those were our main sports. And in, I believe it was 2003 and 2005, we were in elementary school, and our high school softball team won the state championship twice. And those were the first 2 state championships our school had ever won. So growing up, I was like, I'm going to play softball. I want to be the best softball player. But we were really good on track and field day. And so
Gotcha.
You could run cross country starting in 5th grade I think, yeah, 5th or 6th grade at my school. And my 6th grade, one of my 6th grade coaches, he was the head men's track and field coach. And he was just like, I think you guys really need to run. I want to encourage you to go out for it. And I said yes. And my sister said no, because she was like more of a sprinter.
Right.
So in 5th grade, I was like the only one. Or might have been, I think it might have been 6th grade. I was running cross country, but my sister wouldn't run. And then we got to middle school. And my mom was like, you guys have to choose. You're either doing track in the spring or you're doing softball in the spring. And I don't know what went off on our heads, but we were like, we should do track. So we just stopped playing softball from there. And then it just started compounding year after year. My specialty in middle school was actually long jump. So I would go to like the AAU championships and I would long jump and my sister would run the 400. Like we didn't do distance at all, but once high school came, we had a couple of girls in our grade or around our age that we had become really close with, and they had ran too. So we were just like convincing all of our friends to start going out for cross country, because before we had made it to high school, our cross country team didn't even have 5 runners. Like they couldn't even field a complete team going into a meet. So by our senior year, I think we were up to 8 or 9 runners, and we were like, this is the coolest thing ever. Wow. We actually have alternates at meets. So it was just kind of like, and that's a huge part of our story and our success, is just the people we were surrounded by. They are some of my best friends to this day, but it was just like everyone was convincing everyone to start running. And then we would do everything together. We would train together all summer, then go to someone's house. It was just this story of like this dream team coming together and bringing others along. And then, each day you're getting 1% better. And by the end, we have this amazing 4x8 team just because we all started together in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade.
Yeah, I was able to actually watch a long lost YouTube video of that 4x8 team. And you guys were, I believe, being interviewed after the race. And when it comes to confidence, and I'm going to use that word because that's what I saw a presence from you and your sister that seemed like the leaders of that 4x8 team and the leaders of the track and distance program. One of the most impressive awards that I saw you win was actually something along the lines of a mental toughness award, where you were acknowledged for not only your athletics, but your academics, being solid in the classrooms, a lot of A's. I'm not sure you saw many B's in high school, but I would love for you to talk to the listeners about confidence and the balancing act of being a student athlete, because that's not easy. You've seen it as a coach at Valor Christian, but you've also experienced it as an athlete. Can you maybe walk us through the juggling act?
Yeah, I think it's so unique given what high school you go to. College athletics is a whole different level. But if we're just talking about the high school aspect first, I came from a very small school where I didn't have very much pressure in academics. We only had 4 or 5 AP classes we could choose from. Like my cross country coach was my AP Calc teacher. What is now like my aunt, I grew up 400 meters down the road from her. She was my PE teacher. So I would go to PE and get my morning miles or lift in and eat some breakfast. So it wasn't your typical, if I compare it to Valor Christian, the stresses that they have, or those student athletes have on a daily basis. I did not have them. I hardly had homework at night. So my story's a little different in that aspect. But I think going back to like your initial question, the confidence comes from the work. I was injury free my whole high school career. That wasn't the case in college, and my career went very different in college. My sister was injury free her whole high school career. All of our teammates were injury free. We didn't overtrain. My body felt great. I was ready to race. We would race 3 to 4 times a week in the track season, like not your typical only race once or twice. Just the whole lineup, you would look at this training, you'd be like, I think they're pretty good, but I have no idea what these workouts mean or what they can actually do on a given day. But for us, that's where the confidence came from. I could run 4 events at any meet. I used to run the hurdles. I would do the 4x4. but I needed that confidence to be able to step up to the mile and say, like, I can outkick anyone in the state, because I knew I split that in the 4x4. Whereas maybe another runner, especially nowadays at the high school level, they might run the 2 mile and they're never going to be put on a 4x4. They might go to the biggest meet in the nation, and that's their one time to hit it big the whole season. My mindset was so different than that. And I think that's where the confidence came, in addition to the fact, like, I didn't see in high school, I wouldn't race the 5A athletes until the state championship. Maybe I would see them one time at a random race in the middle of the season.
Right.
But when I was ready to line up at the state meet, it was, I don't care who's on the line, I'm going to win this race, like that. And I think a lot of that is innate. Brittany and I reflected on that in the last podcast we were in. He was like, do you think that a coach helped you with that? And we're like, I think it was innate. I'm not sure where it came from, but like, that is all we knew. So that's what we went with. And when you mentioned like the mental attitude award winner, for anyone not from Indiana, what it is they give it out to one student athlete for every single sport. So the tennis championship, one person gets it. It kind of has to do with like your community, leadership, academics, athletics.
Awesome.
And my sister won it in basketball. So she won it in basketball that winter. We made it to the state championship and we ended up losing, but she won it. So going into track, I was like, they're not going to give it to her again. So my goal was to win it. And I remember like, I just like really wanted to win the mental attitude award, which is interesting. Like, you think you'd be focused. I was focused on winning state championships and running events too, but I was like, I really want to win this. And they give it to you at the end of the game or the meet. So they've awarded everyone and I won it. And they were like, you guys were the first sisters to ever win it in separate sports.
Wow.
So it's just this really cool storyline essentially. But it's been great to go back and reflect on it. And I don't even know, I'm going to need you to send me the interview after this, because I've seen the race 1,000 times. I still get goosebumps. Literally my stomach hurts when I still watch it. I'll watch it a couple of times a year if I need a little confidence boost or just like put life into perspective.
Yeah.
But it is just so fun to go back and reflect on all of it. It was like truly the state championship in 2013 is one of the best days of my entire life. Still in 2023.
That's so cool. And I'm glad that you touched on a little bit with injuries and your collegiate career. And I definitely want to go there. But first, to kind of wrap up your high school career, the most astonishing thing, and you gave it away with your sister's accolade, but here you are as an avid basketball player. And what kind of makes our stories full circle is when I was a tennis coach at Regis Jesuit here in Colorado, I had this really tall gal playing tennis that was coveted by the basketball coach. And so she actually ended up attending an open gym and a couple years into it develops her game to where she stops playing tennis, plays full-time basketball junior and senior year, becomes recruited to Stanford. Her name is Fran Beliebe, and she became known as the Dunker. And I watched her be able to go from hitting crushing forehands and serves on a tennis court to dunking at McDonald's All-American games. And to hear that you were injury-free in high school, knowing how you're cutting to play basketball, which, by the way, you're a some odd 1,000 billion point scorer and still, I believe to this day, hold the rebound record at your high school. Is that correct?
Oh, I have no idea. That's a great question. My sister was the better basketball player. So she actually still holds the state record for the most points scored in a semi-state game. She scored like 48 points and had 19 rebounds. And that's the only reason we made it to the state championship. But
right.
I might be the rebounder.
That's what I saw. I saw that you got some rebounds. So. And I'm just thinking of this distance runner and steeplechaser and long jump, like all these different things. And I'm like, there she is, like going up getting rebounds. How in the world did you balance being a two-sport athlete? Because you and I both know what we've seen as coaches, especially in your perspective with the distance runners that you were helping and the rigor. It's season all year round, right? But How'd you do it in both basketball and running?
I'm actually the biggest proponent of being a multi-sport athlete. I will say it all the time. And that's the one thing I think I see in high school runners way more now today versus when I was in school 10 years ago, is that everyone wants to run full-time, 4 seasons, year round. And maybe that works out for some people. I don't think my story would be the same if that were the case for me and my sister. But I think it was just all part of the process. Like, I loved having what I consider 3 seasons. I'm going to run distance, cross country in the fall. I'm going to take a week off and then I'm going to go straight to basketball practice. But I really loved the competitiveness of basketball. My coach was a huge proponent in being the fittest team on the court. So we actually ran a lot in basketball season. We were the fastest team up the court.
That's
so
right.
We won most of our games, honestly, by speed and defense. Like, we were hustlers. Maybe we didn't have the best skill, but we had the most stamina by the end of the game. So it ended up, that's why we were so good at the 800. I lost a lot of speed when I went to college because I didn't have that agility and that quickness. So I am the biggest proponent of that. Like, maybe was I not the fittest at the beginning of the track season? Probably not. But do I need to be? Absolutely not. Like, I was the best come June. And if you look at the trajectory of our high school careers, we always peaked at the state meet every single year. And I think that's hard to do nowadays because everyone's running year round.
Right.
I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being social media and the competitiveness and the comparison that there is today.
Like Strava, like seeing people's runs, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know any different. I was like, we would run maybe 3 or 4 days a week in the morning, 4 or 5 miles, maybe get a tempo workout. So we were doing 2-a-days a little bit, but it was just to keep the base. So if you think of it from like a coach or that standpoint, you're like, okay, it kind of makes sense. You did your long distance in the morning, then you got your speed work done in the evening at basketball practice. So you are still pretty fit. It's just totally different approach to training that I would say is like common nowadays.
Right. Yeah. So you do this balancing act, you stay injury free, a tremendous amount of success for both you and your sister. And I love the hustling mentality. You know, my son, Caden, actually played a little bit of basketball before taking running full time. And he was just that monkey on defense, just, you know, flailing his arms and making it a ruckus for the offense. And that's a tremendous way to play the game. But as we're talking now through into college, I'm sure that you had quite an extensive recruiting process. And I find it interesting that both you and your sister stayed local. But can you maybe walk the listeners through some of the opportunities you had with schools during your recruiting phase?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's one of the number one questions I get asked nowadays, or I want to help high school athletes through, is the recruiting process. Because if I were to go back and do it now, it is very different now with the rules and the deadlines and the dates that you can contact athletes now. But I wish I would have chose differently when I was 18 years old. So my sister and I were kind of like a package. So we knew we were probably going to go to the same school, which was interesting because every coach took that approach differently. Some of them were like, we're going to give you both full rides. Some of them would be like, we're going to give you a full ride. You're going to pay. And then the next year we're going to put you both. It was a very interesting way to leverage it, I would say. But so for anyone that doesn't know, track and field is typically in high school the latest sport to commit to a college. I think last time I looked, the average track and field athlete in high school doesn't commit until the winter of their senior year, which is when we committed.
Wow.
And we really made it to the national stage that next spring. So yes, we were getting recruited by pretty good schools, but I think it would have been totally different had we jumped on the national scene a little bit earlier. But we were convinced that we were going out of state. Purdue and IU are the huge schools in Indiana. My whole family had went to Purdue, but they were really bad at running at the time. So we're like, no, we're not going to Purdue. So we visited, I think, 5 schools. We visited Columbia in New York because there was a girl that was really good in high school in Indiana. Her name's Waverly Neer. She was the top 5K runner in high school. She was a few years older than us. She went to Columbia. So we went to Columbia. I'm gonna have to remember now. We went to Indiana. Wake Forest.
Yep.
We canceled a visit to Penn State, and then there might have been one other. I can't remember. We thought we were going to take them all. And my family really loved Wake Forest. They were like, we really want you to go to Wake Forest. The coach was from Indiana. He would come watch us all year, and we loved him. But their team was really bad again. And we had come from this team that we had built up from nothing. We were like, no, we want to be on a good team, and we wanted to be competitive. So we randomly took a visit at Indiana, and they weren't great. I think they were like maybe 7th or 8th in the Big Ten, but we really fell in love with the campus. They had sports management, which was the degree or major I wanted to go into.
That was mine as well. Nice.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I was like, this is what we're liking. And we both came home and we were like, we think we like IU the most. And kind of a factor to that. So my grandma raised us essentially. And we were like, okay, we'll be kind of close to my grandma. She was going to have a really hard time. She was going to be an empty nester when we left. And like her whole life, to a degree, like revolved around us. She would take us to practice. She would take us to school. She was at every single meet. So I think that had to play a part with it when we decided to both go to Indiana. We were like, this is amazing. It was a really good story. The two of the best runners from Indiana are actually going to stay local. They're going to go to Indiana. And our coaches at IU, they were like, this is the best bargain we've ever gotten, because we were on this, what you call 21st century scholarship. It's a program in Indiana that you have to apply for when you're in middle school. And if your parents make less than a certain amount a year, you can go to any school in Indiana for free.
Wow.
So we kind of liked Indiana. We were like, okay. And, the coaches were so for it. They were like, we don't even have to pay them $1 and they're going to come here. So we both ended up going to Indiana. We didn't even have to be on athletic scholarships. So Very interesting.
I see. Yeah. That, a few things resonated with me, Bethany, as you walked us through that. One is your grandma. I think that, grandparents, it sounds like it was a little bit, of a situation of which was maybe unconventional to the normal household. And I can deeply relate to that. As I shared before we hopped on, with my mom. I lost my mom when I was 20, and, kind of having a unique situation at home. And I guess it leads me to a question when it comes to impacts. We talked about your high school coach, but maybe tell us a little bit about that relationship and what it meant to you when you were able to sign that dotted line with your sister to, yes, you had a lot of ways to favor being an Indiana native and the 21st century stuff, but you were one of the best runners and basketball players in the country. So what did it mean to you to sign that dotted line, knowing the people that were there for you the whole time?
We were so excited. And another factor that I forgot to mention was that the Indiana State meet was always at IU. They have one of the nicest tracks in the country. It's amazing. So we were like, this is amazing. We're going to get to go run there. We'll practice there. I don't remember much about signing. We didn't commit until right around Christmas of our senior year. So it was kind of a late commitment for some people. But we were like, this is amazing. Everyone, our high school coaches are going to get to come see us, all of this. I don't think we knew too much more than that. I remember being in high school, you're really wowed by the facilities. Yeah. Are they sponsored by Adidas or Nike? Things that like maybe aren't as important.
Right. Yeah.
But when we got there, very similar to your story, actually, we lost my grandma at 20. So we got there my freshman year. I ended up running cross country. My sister redshirted because she's more of the middle distance runner. And I had, going back to high school, I had made the Pan Am junior game in the steeplechase. That's so right. I had to miss my first week of college to go to Columbia and race the steeple when I'm trying to get ready for my first cross country college career, where you jump up to a 6K. It was a lot at once.
Wow.
And then you bring in different training. I think freshman year for any athlete, it's a huge adjustment. You're just like, I need to make it through, and then I'll try to get better my sophomore year. So my grandma, my grandpa, they were our biggest fans in high school. They were divorced, but they would go to the meets together. Gotcha. They would help us out however they could. They are like the best thing to ever happen to me and my sister. And we have so many photos. Like, you could probably see my grandpa in the back of like some of those interviews, they were just like the joy of our lives. So we were like, this is amazing. They get to come to all of these meets. They can still support us. We had very mediocre freshman years compared to what everyone thought we were going to do after our senior year. The training was very different. We were very overtrained compared to high school. But you're a naive freshman and you're like, I'll do whatever. I just want to be good. I'm going to run as fast as I can to stay up with the top girls. It was so different than high school. And I wish I would have made a different decision back then. It would have changed the trajectory of my college career. Yeah. But I think seeing how it played out, we went through my freshman year and then we went home back to our childhood house in my hometown that next summer. And my grandma wasn't feeling well the whole summer, but she was super excited that we were home. She wasn't living alone anymore. And then she found out she had pancreatic cancer. And it was stage 4 when she found out. So it was traumatic. Like, I'm sure it's similar to yours. You're 20 years old, you're trying to be an athlete. You have no idea how to process your emotions, and your whole life revolves around your sport. So like your sport becomes your outlet, essentially. It was so sad. Like, we were trying to take care of her. My whole family was like, don't drop out of school. We want you to go back to IU. We will help take care of your grandma. So her ex ended up, my step grandma and my grandpa would end up coming over and like almost caring for her. Wow. She ended up passing away 8 weeks after she got diagnosed. So it was during our cross country season, my sophomore year. And it was just, things went very downhill from there. I was trying to run. I was trying to cope with my running career. Then I got injured, and it was just a lot happened at once. Yeah. But I think looking back on it, my faith is very important to me. And I think there was a reason that we chose IU. Like, I could not imagine being at another school. We got to go home 7 out of the 8 weeks. On the weekends. We'd go to practice throughout the week, and then our coaches let us go home on the weekends and long run at home so we could spend time with her. So looking back, everything makes sense. But at the time I was like, what is going on and how do I manage this? Yeah, that, leaning on your faith in the moment of, let's just use a word that comes to mind when I think of what I was going through, is it's chaos, right? When you have a sport that you lean on each and every day and you have some things that aren't working out with either injuries or running too much, and then have stuff happening at home. It makes me think back to, my mom. She was in and out of rehab 4 times for alcohol. I took her to her first rehab when I was 16, and she got out of her 4th rehab and unfortunately just could not function her life without drinking. And it led her to having a medical emergency that ended up taking her life. And I remember going back to college after she had passed, and the emotional side of it, I always thought I was on cloud 9, 20 years old, best shape of my life, playing Division I athletics. And I thought I was, the king of the hill. And then I go back, and mentally I was really struggling with it. And I think, to your point, IU was a blessing to have the ability to go to and from, and to have those last moments mean something. And I want to kind of take that moment of chaos, because that was a defining moment in you and your sister's life, right? And then you have this next chapter that comes up, which for you was NC State. I'd love for you to walk the listeners through that moment where you were at a crossroads, you felt you needed to transfer, and how was that decision for you in the long run? Yeah, it happened pretty quickly. So my grandma passed away. We were still trying to race. And surprisingly, through all of this, my sister and I both had our best college cross-country careers by far. We were running 1 and 2 for IU, and we were middle distance runners. Like, we shouldn't have been running 1 and 2. But I think that was our saving grace. Like, that was our outlet. Shortly after cross-country season, I got injured for the first time in my life. So I tore my plantar in indoor season. So on the bottom of my foot. Man. And that's when things went very downhill very quickly. I was injured for the first time. I was then having to cope with the loss of my grandma for the first time. I was like out of shape, gaining weight. I just like didn't know what to do with myself. And my sister was still trying to race. And it wasn't the best coaching decision when we decided to go to IU. And I think like when going back to you asking if like any of your high school coaches had a really impactful impact on your life, that's how it was. And similar to a lot of the coaches at Valor, I see a lot of their tendencies or personalities in my high school coaches. And when I went to college, my college coach at IU was nothing like that. He was, I will write the workouts, I will come to practice, I will time you. And that's it. Like if you need to have a one-on-one meeting with me, schedule it with my assistant, come in, we'll chat about it. Wow. And I just realized like that is not what is going to make me successful. And it's not what I want, especially through a lot of hardship. So that spring of my sophomore year, I told my sister, I was like, I'm transferring. I don't want to be here anymore. All of that. And she actually thought she was still going to stay at IU. And I just opened up the recruiting process again. As a transfer, you can take 5 visits. I visited CU, actually. I visited Syracuse, Florida State, NC State, and I think Indiana State. And I was just looking everywhere. I was like, I don't know what I want, but I want out of here. Right. And I went to NC State first. They had a sport management program, which I liked. And they had a female coach, which I was like, I think I really need that right now. We didn't have a female on staff at IU, not one female my sophomore year. And I felt like it made a difference with the team culture, results, everything. And so I went to I went to NC State first, and I actually fell in love with it. I couldn't get past the fact that it was in North Carolina. My sister was going to be like 10 hours away from me, but it was a very blue culture environment. It reminded me so much of what I grew up in. So I was like, this is what I like. The coaches seem like that. Of the team and the personality, I was like, they grind, they work hard, they go home, they do it again. It wasn't like this ego-driven culture that I felt like other schools were. It was like, we're going to put in the work, we're going to take time off, we're not going to overtrain. And every single coach at NC State has actually went through the program. They've had the same director since the 80s. My coach had ran for him in the 90s. She was a national champion. Her daughter was on my team, was a national champion. So it was just this culture that you were like, I want to be a part of. Wow. And I remember sitting there at their desk, and they were like, I was injured at the time still. I was depressed for the first time. I was just like, I want out of here. And I sat there, and they were like, tell me your story. What happened? I started crying at the coach's desk as like a 21-year-old. And they were so sweet about it. And my high school mentor, Kyle Walsh, was like, this is the place you're supposed to be. He was already at Indiana State, and he was like, I love that coach. I think you should go there. So I ended up going to NC State. And then my sister shortly after was like, yep, I got to go too. Like, I'm transferring. And she stayed local, and she went to Indiana State to go run for a high school mentor, Kyle Walsh. So we just kind of split. And then things kind of unfolded from there. But I just think about it now. I'm like, that was so brave for like a 21-year-old to do. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. But would it have happened if my grandma never passed away? Probably not.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm sure in that moment, you're asking a lot of why questions. Why is this happening? You know, cancer, it's just devastating, especially, you know, stage 4. And in that moment, you're asking why. But when you reflect back, it was a building block that was necessary for your development, for your journey. And I just would love for you to thank you, by the way, for sharing the vulnerability piece with your coaches at NC State and having that moment of bawling your eyes out, because you probably had a lot of stuff built up inside at that point. And you were just desperately looking for a place to decompress, right? And I just would love for you to take us into those years at NC State. I mean, there you are, coming off of an injury, coming off of a difficult circumstance with a coach. You get there. I'd love for you to summarize what it meant to run there.
I'm so thankful to this day that they gave me a chance. I was very injured at the time. And I remember too, sitting in their room with my head coach, Lori Hennis, and then the director, Raleigh Geiger. They're both still there today. Oh, wow. And Raleigh just like looked at me, and he was like, talent never dies. And I will never forget that. And because I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be at the level I was at a couple years ago, and he just would tell me talent never dies. So I was so excited to go to NC State. They were pretty good at the time. They would be second or third at ACCs. But once I got there, we actually ended up winning back-to-back ACC championships in cross country.
Wow.
And then they were fourth, fifth, and eighth at the NCAA cross country championships. And I was only an alternate 1 year because I redshirted 1 year. I wasn't great at cross country the next year. And then I was the 9th best runner. So I was the alternate. But it was just great to be back in a winning culture. That was a big thing when I left IU. I was like, I shouldn't be the best cross country runner. It's not my specialty. I want to be on a team that's good and wins championships. So I didn't have the best individual career. I had a very, very hard time bouncing back from that injury. And then I had a lot of health issues. I ended up being allergic to gluten. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. My body was really inflamed. I think it was a lot of the stress of life. I kind of all hit at once, and my body was having a really hard time dealing with it. So it was not a good individual. I steepled a few times. I'd have a couple good races here and there, but I could not string together a good season. But from a team perspective, it was incredible. They've now, looking at 2022 and 23, 21 and 22, they've won the last two NCAA championships. So they have just started, they are on like an insane level now. And it's just really neat to look back and see like we were kind of part
of that. Yeah.
Of the beginning of that. But it was a great experience. I recommend now to my high school athletes, I'm like, if you want to look at NC State, there is not one bad thing I would say about them. And the best part was I was on a very large scholarship for not being a great athlete then. They never took it away.
Wow.
They were there for me and everything. I love that coach to this day. I still will recommend some of my athletes to her. And it's just a program that I think if you're a parent in high school, you're like, that's a program that I want my kids to go to.
Yeah, that is so cool that, again, finding the silver lining, the positive into each one of these situations that you've been in. And I think what really resonates with me is after college, you go on and spend a little bit of time helping as a coach, but I'm always fascinated by what athletes do coming out of college in their professional careers. And I think I would just love for you to walk us through the transition you made from being an elite athlete to getting into the work world and how it's been for you and your sister post college to continue to find the ways, feed that competitive spirit, but do it in such a way that allows you to be an impact with what you do in your 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's a tough transition. I always say that it doesn't matter how prepared you are. Like I got my undergrad and my grad in sports admin and management. I used to be in SAC. Like I was in everything to promote student athlete mental wellness, health. And I still felt like it was really, really tough. Ours was different, I think, too. Like we don't have a lot of family to fall back on. So like my sister is kind of everything to me. Like I couldn't move home and just like chill or get back into the swing of things. And then most runners in college will take a 5th year of eligibility. So after competing my 5th year, which I think was like 2018, I was ready to be done at that point. I loved practicing. I loved the day-to-day process, the journey, but I did not enjoy competing. It wasn't in high school. I loved it. I didn't love it then. So I was ready to be done, where my sister was on a different level. She had finally, her 5th year, got back to her high school self. She had PR'd in the 800 for the first time. So it's really neat for me to just kind of be a fan and observe that, because it wasn't something I was able to get back to. So I would still go watch my sister race. She actually ended up moving to Iowa after her 5th year for 6 months to join a semi-professional team. University of Northern Iowa was in her conference, the NBC, and they're really good at distance running. So she moved up there with 2 of her competitors and actually trained post-collegiately. I loved it. I was like finishing grad school for a year, kind of like a graduate assistant with the track and cross country team. So we were still both involved as we were trying to transition out, which I think is another struggle in itself, because like you're not competing, but you're still kind of like hanging on. to it. So my sister only competed for like 6 months after, but I would get to go watch her at these races. I would get to travel with her. So I loved it. I was like, I don't have to compete, but I get to watch you compete, and I get to see all the same people that I love. But fast forward, after we both finished grad school, I convinced her to move down to North Carolina. So we became roommates for the first time since like we were 21 years old. We like fought like sisters, but it was amazing. It was right before the pandemic started, and neither of us could find a job because I wanted to work in college athletics. And then I had this big like aha realization when I finished grad school that I don't want to make minimum wage, and I don't want to go be an intern at a random D2 school in the middle of like West Virginia or something.
Right.
So I was like, I did all this work and I don't think I want to do this anymore. My grad school advisors were not happy at all. But I was like, I just want to make money. Like, I'm ready to make money and figure out what I want to do. So I got hired at a random consulting firm in Raleigh, and my sister actually got hired with NC State Athletics. She was just helping them, I think, in the accounting department. I don't even remember, or ops or something like that. But it was nice to just still be in a routine. I think that's one of the biggest things that college athletes struggle with when you're done, is like your schedule's not full 24 hours a day, and like you get to decide. So I liked the routine of like wearing normal clothes to a job, but that faded very quickly. I stayed at the job for 10 months and the pandemic hit. Right when the pandemic hit, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. There were a lot of politics, and the culture was interesting. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing this. So that's actually when I moved out to Denver. So I hadn't coached high school before then. I came to see a former NC State teammate who was in grad school at DU out here, and she was my best friend at NC State. And I came out here and I was like, I think I'm going to move out here. I think I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to move out here, which is wild because I would never do that now at 29. But at like 25 or 26, I was like, I'll do it. I don't care. And my sister and I were kind of arguing as siblings, and she was like, I support you. You should do it. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. And like going full circle, my sister was working for the athletic department, and there's a assistant AD at NC State. His name's Bob Erickson. And so Kyle Walsh was my mentor in like high school, beginning of college. Bob's my mentor now. I call him like MB, Mentor Bob. And my sister met him through that job. And I used to see him all the time at NC State. He's in charge of the facilities, some of that. So I'd always see him walking around. He'd always have a smile on his face. But because of that job that my sister had, they got pretty close. And then I met Bob outside of work through that. And like to this day, he's like my dad. So it's just like everything ends up working out in the end. But what happened is I moved out here. I've been out here for 3 years now. When I moved out here, going back to like something that's like really fulfilling or figuring out what you want to do in your 20s, I think that's so tough for everyone. I was like, I just know I want to coach right now. I want to coach. I want to give back. I want to do something I'm passionate about. And I was looking for a job. I knew nothing about like the Denver area when I moved out here. It was the middle of the first year of the pandemic. Like people didn't even know if they were having practice. And I was finding random jobs online. But this is like such a funny story. I went on a date with a guy who lived in Highlands Ranch, and I knew nothing about Valor, the schools. And he was like, if you're looking for a school to coach at, I would recommend Valor. He was like, when I have kids, I want to send my kids to Valor. And so I cold emailed Greg Copeland, like one random summer day 3 years ago. And I gave him like my running resume, told him what I was about, and this is what I was interested in. And he emailed me back literally within hours, and we were meeting for coffee the next day. And so that's how I ended up at Valor, which is crazy.
Wow.
And my sister ended up staying in North Carolina. She met her now husband on the beach, like a week after I moved, on the beach of North Carolina. So everything ends up working out. But at the time, you're like, I'm 23, 24, 25. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I tip my hat to you for taking that risk. You know, I think there's a lot of times in life where, especially as athletes, we become so regimented, we get used to those habits. And for you to make some of the shifts you've had in your life, look at the opportunities that it's opened. And, you know, I've been fortunate to have my son be able to run for Greg Copeland and Valor, and your impact as an assistant coach and your ability to carry that story into an opportunity to pay it forward to other kids, I'm sure it had to mean a lot to you. And I think as coaches, and this is a funny Valor story for me, is I actually was the first tennis coach ever at Valor. I was hired there 16 years ago. And at the time, I was in the middle of becoming potentially a director of tennis. And during the interview process, they're like, yeah, you can absolutely go coach in Highlands Ranch and do the high school gig. And I'm like, awesome. And then they hired me and they're like, you can't coach in Highlands Ranch. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So 3 weeks into Valor, I step down as the head coach, and then I go on my own journey. And then all of a sudden, here I am as a parent of a kid that wants to go to Valor. And I'm asking the guy that replaced me 16 years ago. He's the head coach now. And now I'm his assistant, and I have been the last 4 years. So it's like sometimes the path that we think we have in our minds, it seems like God always is, humbling us by saying that path is going to always look a little different, and you got to trust me when it comes to that stuff, right? So
I love that.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey on my end as well. But I want to really try to put this all together with this incredible athletic career that you and your sister had, some trials and tribulations that I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share. And now you get to this point to where you're in career, your sister's about to get married. You know, there's so many beautiful things happening in your life right now, but it didn't come without some forks in the road, some twists and turns. But it leads me to one last question for you, Bethany, is, there's a lot that you could unpack to someone that was maybe a 15, 16-year-old version of you. If you had the opportunity to sit down with a 15, 16-year-old gal, or go back to the little town you grew up in and find a local coffee shop and sit down with that Bethany, knowing what you know now, I'd love for you to share some advice, some words of wisdom of how to navigate high school to college to life. What would you tell yourself?
There's so many things that come to mind. I think if it were me talking to my younger self, I would just say, go for it. Like, I listen to so many podcasts that are like, the younger you are, the more risks you can take. And I've seen that in my life in my 20s. I'm now 29. I turned 29 last month. And even now I'm like, would I make that move that I did 3 years ago to Denver? Would I make that somewhere else? Probably not. I don't know. It would be a lot tougher for me to do that now. So anyone who's younger, it doesn't matter if you're a runner or not. I would just say, go for it. Take the risk. You can figure it out later on. And like on those lines, like it really does work out. Like your story will play out in such a beautiful way that you would never imagine. And like, if you do believe in God or you have faith, I think that was like my saving grace, that I just had this thing in my mind. It was like, I just have faith that it's all going to work out. If I look back at like certain times in my early 20s when a lot of life happened, I probably didn't think that way then, but now I'm like, it makes sense. And it makes sense why I am the way that I am because of my upbringing and my story. So that would be my first one. Just literally go for it. Take the risk. When I had an incredible high school career, I was just taking risks, going for it. I did not care about anyone else, anything. I was like, we're doing this. And we're going to be the best that we can be. And then my second one would be kind of a different track, but this is how I kind of look at coaching, is like the servant leadership mindset or things like that. Like, just be a blessing. Like, how can you leave a place better than you found it? And even going back to like the Indiana Track and Field Hall of Fame induction this summer, it was such an incredible reflection because one of our best friends was on our 4x8 team who still holds the Indiana high school record. And we were like, we've already spoke for our individual inductions. We want you to speak for the relay. And I had no idea what she was going to say. And she's very well spoken. And she was like, we only ran because of these two. Like, they convinced us to get on the track. And it made me think of that. And it makes me think of coaching, even though I'm not coaching at the moment, is like, I just always want to leave a place better than I found it, or be a blessing, especially if I'm younger, because there's so many things like now, even with your son, the high schoolers I coach, I'm telling you, like, they left me better than when I started at Valor. And like, I know as a high schooler, they're going to be like, whatever, Bethany, that's hard to believe. But I'm telling you, when you get into the adult world and some of the politics of your careers and things like that, I wish I could just go back and be like, nail the basics. That stuff doesn't matter. Put it all into perspective. So it's a lot of answers at once, but go for it, take the risk, and just like be the blessing that leaves the place better than you found it.
Well said, and tremendous words for yourself. And I'm taking a lot of mental notes right now, being a dad of 2 daughters, that there is a certain level of risk taking that's necessary, or a level of discomfort that's necessary in life for us to grow. And I often teach you got to risk it to get the biscuit. So looks like there's a lot of biscuits to be had out there. And I just love what you shared there. And lastly, I would just love to hear your future plans. You know, you're career oriented now, and I would just love to hear what the next 3 to 5 years look like for Bethany Neeley.
That's a great question. I'm not really like a 5-year planner. I'm a planner, but I love to take it like day by day, year by year.
Nice.
Because if you've seen it in my 20s, every year looks very drastically different than I imagined it would. In an ideal world, in the next 3 to 5 years, my sister and I will be living close together again. Her husband's in the military in Nashville, so that's the reason we don't live in the same city right now. But as we begin to think about future, having kids, starting families, that is a big thing. And we're really big about giving back to the running community, especially in Indiana. It's the same coaches and starters that we had 10 years ago. So I think we're both beginning to think about, outside of like our full-time jobs, ways to really bring back that running career culture and give back in some way. And then you bring in the twin factor, and it's a little bit easier, I feel like, to do that versus like trying to go do it on your own. So that would kind of be more of like a side passion project. In terms of full-time career, that's a great question. I'm very multi-passionate about a lot of things in life. So right now I currently work for a real estate mortgage software startup company here in Denver. So I've worked in the real estate industry since I moved to Denver. I really like it. I love the people. I don't know if it's a forever career. I'm in like account management right now. So it really speaks to my skill set, but I think that's really transferable to other things. I'm really passionate about like sports, health and wellness, and personal development, kind of similar to you. So I'm kind of in that same boat, like figuring out what that means for next steps, and we will see from there. I don't have a great answer yet.
For sure. Well, I definitely have a future plan for you and I, is being on the BTB project. It's only fitting to have 2 Bs come together. And it would be a tremendous blessing to have you and your sister come back on a future episode to have the Neeley story be full circle. So definitely keep that in your back pocket. Congratulations to your sister. I hope you guys enjoy that moment together. And Bethany, I just cannot thank you enough for spending some time with me today on the BTB project.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My one disclaimer I'll end with is that if you bring Brittany on here, she doesn't listen to this podcast. There's a good chance she might say the same exact things that I say. So just be very prepared for that.
Gotcha. So I have never had twins on, but I really try my best to prepare, and I certainly appreciate that advice. Thank you so much, and definitely look forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you.
All right. What a tremendous message shared by Bethany today, and just the ability to understand her career, the relationship she had with her twin sister, and the ability to have not only just a built-in training partner, but someone that was able to do life with her. I think the most telling thing for me was when she was able to accept that induction into the Indiana Track and Field Hall of Fame, when she was able to be there by her side with her sister, who was inducted at the same time. Bethany has a tremendous story, and I'm just so glad that you as the listener had an opportunity to hear what life is like as a high-level athlete, both in high school and in college, but more importantly, how that translates to the real world. What you endure as an athlete allows you to have a perspective and an understanding that allows you to take on a world in just a different way. And Bethany's story shows that, and I hope it inspired you as a listener. Hey, if this podcast was something that resonated with you, if Bethany's story was something that was an inspiration and was something that motivated you to make a change or go after your goals, do me a favor and like and subscribe to the BTB Project. I have several more guests and inspiring content in future episodes. But I appreciate you as a listener. I appreciate the BTB community and the opportunity to be on mission as we move forward. As always, impossible is nothing. Until the next time, take care.